There's nothing fancy about memory. It's either there or it isn't. You either remember where you put your gun or you don't. So when I first heard about this thing called the Mind Palace, the one from the telly, the one that skinny English detective used like a filing cabinet for his brain, I figured it was just another bit of theatrical nonsense, a writer's fantasy, something to make the brooding genius seem smarter than the rest of us who are sitting at home eating cold dinners. But then I started looking, and the damn thing turned out to be real. Not real in the way that a bottle of scotch and a pack of cigarettes is real, but real in the way that it gets a scientist standing in front of a microphone pointing at a brain scan on a screen. That was the part that kept me up at night. The old con that turned out to be legit. They call it the method of loci, Latin. It means that some smart-ass 2,000 years ago thought it sounded more impressive than it was. Loci just means places. You take a location you know well. You know it like you know the back of your hand, the one with the scar, and you stash information in it, physical spots, landmarks. Then, when you need to recall, you walk the route in your head. Sounds simple. Sounds like something a drunk conjured up in a bar at 2 a.m. But this one had weight behind it. Historical weight. The Romans used it, the Greeks before that. Not one of those half-remembered anecdotes either. The kind that gets corrected by a professor 3 weeks later in a letter to a newsletter. This one stuck. And now some neuroscientist in the Netherlands decided to put it under the lamp and see what it was made of. The paper was in Science Advances. I know, science papers aren't usually my beat. I walk the confessions and alibis, not peer reviews. But when a study makes a memory champion and a regular guy look the same on the brain scan, you pay attention. You don't look away. They ran 2 experiments. The first was a showdown. 17 memory athletes, people who'd been training in the method of loci for years, ranked among the best in the world at remembering things that should not be forgotten, against 16 regular people who hadn't been near the technique. They gave both groups a list of words to recall in order. The athletes smoked the control group. I wasn't surprised. You could have told me that without a lab. The question wasn't whether the skilled people were better. The question was why. That's where the second experiment got interesting. 50 ordinary people, divided into 3 groups. One got the full method of loci training, the real thing, the kind that takes commitment and repetition. The other got a working memory training program, and the third did nothing. Then they tested all of them, and not just once. 20 minutes later, 24 hours later, and then again 4 months later. That last one mattered. Memory that disappears after a week is just a party trick. Memory that holds after 4 months is something else. The loci group didn't just improve, they held the improvement. When the other groups faded back towards their averages, the loci-trained participants were still ahead. They recalled words at a rate that was a long way from where they started. That was the first crack in the door. Now, here's where the thing turned ugly. I don't mean ugly like a bar fight at closing time. I mean ugly in the way a mirror gets when you've been drinking and you look at yourself and see something you don't recognise. They used MRI scans. They put people in the machine and watched what happened when they encoded and retrieved information. And here's what they found. The participants who trained with the method of loci started showing something the researchers called neutral efficiency. That's a fancy way of saying their brains started doing less work while producing better results. Less activity in the relevant regions, better memory performance. Now, most people hear less brain activity and they think it means that their brain is slacking off. It's the opposite. Imagine a city that's been running on bad traffic for years, sirens, jams, the whole mess, and then someone builds a better road system. The place doesn't get quieter because it's given up. It gets quieter because the traffic flows. That's what neutral efficiency looks like on a brain scan. The city that's finally figured it out. And then it got worse, in the sense that it got realer. Because the brain patterns in the trained experts started looking like the brain patterns in the actual memory champions. Not somewhat, not vaguely, strikingly similar, according to the paper. After 6 weeks of practice, the gap between world-ranking memory athlete and a regular person who just learned the method had narrowed in ways that were visible on a scan. Of course, here's the catch. There's always a catch. The lead researcher, a woman named Isabella Wagner, said it straight, probably because she'd seen enough colleagues dancing around the obvious. The method of loci requires time and regular practice. It isn't a pill you swallow. It isn't something that works because you read about it over breakfast. You have to build the palace, room by room, and it takes effort that you can't shortcut. But here's the thing about that caveat. It doesn't make the technique smaller. It makes it honest. You don't get to borrow the genius's brain because you saw the concept in a TV show. You don't get to borrow the method, and the method, it turns out, works if you're willing to put in the hours.
I started this thing expecting to find crap. A clever story dressed up as science, the way most of the self-improvement industry dresses itself, as if wanting to be better is the same as knowing how. The evidence kept stacking up. The memory gains were real. The brain changes were real. The durability of the improvements, months later, without continued practice, was real. And the reason it felt eerie, the reason I kept turning the idea over in my head like a cigarette you haven't lit yet, wasn't because memory athletes were born special. It was because ordinary people could learn to do what the athletes did. The technique wasn't magic, it was geography. You weren't storing information, you were building a map, and the brain, the same brain that navigated you safely through thousands of dark streets and unfamiliar corridors, knew how to read a map better than any filing system ever invented. And that's the part that got me. Not the brilliance, the ordinariness of it. The idea that what looked like genius was just someone who learned to walk the route in their head and trust the landmarks. And while we're here, don't forget, like, comment and subscribe to these videos. Somewhere in this city, a man is forgetting the name of his daughter. Somewhere else, a woman is about to fail an exam she studied 12 hours for and can't record a single answer. And somewhere, not far from either one of them, someone is about to start building a mental house, room by room, until the building is strong enough to hold everything they need. The Mind Palace isn't a fantasy, it's a floor plan, and the blueprints have been lying around for 2,000 years. All you have to do is build it. That's the case. That's the file. Take it or leave it.